After a fantastic talk yourself and that amazing introduction to your husband and he coming in and saying all that he did, it reminds me of something that I think encapsulates what you were trying to say. That you are not a drop in the ocean, but the entire ocean in a drop. Prime Minister Trudeau, there is one thing that has always fascinated me and drawn me and inspired me about you, personally, as an individual. And that has been the reflection of empathy in the manner in which you conduct yourself. And it's such a rare thing to witness. I hope to be, and we witnessed it right now when you were speaking with us. And earlier in the session, we spoke about how important empathy is to build better societies, to become better citizens of the world and the planet. I'm going to start with having a wonderful individual ask you the first question, because she's really looking forward to asking her question. May we have Lakshmi Tripathi ask the first question, please.
Namaskar, Jai Shri Mahakal. It's a very warm welcome from my country and my community, transgenders. I belong to the oldest ethnic transgender community in the world. The first country I left from India to visit was Canada and Toronto. And of course I have seen, and I really love your work of giving every gender its right, even in your cabinet. I would want to see how the transgender community, because for the first time, way back in 2006, I saw, you can't hear? Yeah, okay. So 2006, when I landed up in Canada and Toronto, the convention center, I was suddenly surrounded by, and a person who rescued me from that crowd was a transgender person and an advocate. And it amazed me for the first time in my life, seeing a person from my community, from some different country, being an advocate, and it inspired and gave me a lot of things to take my work forward in my country. So my question is very straight. When we see all the three genders in your cabinet, and how would the community in Canada, because my sisters, even in Canada, are into sex work, and their security is one more issue. Getting them their complete right is still a very big issue and a challenge for many governments across the world. And how, as a Prime Minister and as an international leader, would you address this issue? Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Lakshmi. It's an honor to see you here. Fundamentally, it comes down to rights. We need to recognize everyone's rights and not discriminate against them for who they are, who they love, what gender they are, what sexual orientation they have. Understanding that everyone has a right to a full and complete life lived in respect and love and acceptance is essential. And I know we throw the word tolerance around an awful lot. And don't get me wrong, there are places in this world where a little tolerance would be wonderful. But can we be honest that tolerance isn't good enough for a society like India or Canada? Think about it. I tolerate you. Doesn't exactly have a very nice ring to it. There's not a religion in the world that says, tolerate thy neighbor. No, it's love your neighbor, accept your neighbor, embrace your neighbor, be friends, be accepting. Those are the things we need to look for. And how we challenge each other, how we challenge traditional structures that still impose their perspective and their rules in a way that doesn't fit and shouldn't fit and doesn't feel right. This matters. Now in Canada, I was the first Prime Minister to walk in pride parades, but we have politicians of all different parties all across the country walking in our gay pride parades right across the country, because that's an expression not just of celebration and acceptance, but it's a reminder that there is much more work to do. Even in Canada, where we have protections written in law, there is more work to do in recognizing full transgender rights. We're moving forward on putting a third gender identity on passports, so you can be M or F or that third box for other. We are recognizing the value and validity of every single person, and until we have a society that is open and accepting fully, we are limiting not just our success as a society, but we are harming individuals who may be our brothers, our sisters, our cousins, our family members, our children. That is not the future we need to build. So there is a lot more work to do, but I thank you for standing up. I thank you for sharing your question. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to share where we need to go as a world.
The next question will be asked by Yuvanshi Sethi.
Good afternoon.
She's straight. She's right.
In the back, there we are.
At a time when countries around the world...
Put the mic closer to your lips, please.
Yeah. At a time when countries around the world are experiencing a wave of anti-globalization and protectionism, what message does Canada want to project in this aspect, and where does this phenomena of globalization head in the near future?
Oh, thank you for the question. What a great question. The question's around where does Canada sit in this anti-globalization movement that we're seeing around the world. I think the first thing we have to understand is why there is this anxiety around globalization around the world. It's because for a lot of people, the promises that progress made, that the rising tide was going to lift all boats, that greater growth, greater prosperity would help everyone, hasn't helped everyone. There are too many people feeling like the ship of progress is passing them by, that maybe the tide is rising, but their boat is anchored to the bottom of the ocean and they're drowning instead. So we have to recognize that much of the approach on globalization, which has created growth, whether it's trade, increased trade deals, whether it's fiscal discipline, whether it's investments in research and education, has helped some people but not helped everyone. It's created growth, but it hasn't ensured that that growth gets shared. So faced with the general anxiety about the future that people can feel, there are two choices as a political leader. You can amplify that fear. Say, yes, you should be mad as hell. You should be raging against this machine. Let's, throw the institutions out. Let's totally transform everything. We'll fix the easy answers to this. Which sounds very appealing, but doesn't necessarily give a path forward. What we've chosen to do in Canada, what we're trying to do is actually fix things so that we're giving more support to the people who need it. We're allaying those fears by giving greater opportunities to low-income and middle-income families. We're trying to ensure that success will give a real and fair chance to everyone to succeed. And that means as we sign trade deals around the world, which we are, we're focusing on making sure that everyone, small businesses, women, minorities, indigenous peoples, they are also able to benefit from the opportunities that globalization can create. Because if everyone turns inward and closes off the world and closes off to strangers and immigrants and refugees, not only will we be poorer, all of us individually, but the world will be going in the wrong direction. Instead of understanding and learning from each other, we will shut off avenues of success and opportunity. Thank you for your question.
We'll take another one from Vasu Agarwal.
Good afternoon, sir. It's truly an honor to be here with you. Sir, my question is, food insecurity is a major issue in most of the northern areas of Canada. So it is in India. How do you think the two countries can share knowledge and work together on solving the problem?
That's a great question. The issue of food insecurity is one that touches every country around the world, even in a country that has as much opportunity and wealth as Canada does in some ways. There are people going to bed hungry every night. There are kids going to school with empty bellies every morning, and we have to do a better job of that. I think one of the things that we're looking at is investing in agricultural innovation, understanding that there's an awful lot that we can do in Canada and around the world through partnerships with India and other countries to develop the kinds of solutions that we need. We have to also understand that there is enough food in the world for everyone. We just have to do a better job of maximizing it, of distributing it, of making sure that it gets to the right place and to the right people, and that we don't have the kind of wastage and inefficiencies that unfortunately continue to plague our global agricultural systems. Sophie, you want to say a couple words?
Yes, I would like to add that this week we met with young girls from Gujarat who came to Delhi for the first time, and Canada invests every year since 1995 in a program called Nutrition International to make sure that we work with nutrition, but from the core, from the start, so that mothers and girls who carry life and who give life don't lack the proper vitamins from the get-go so that they can grow into healthy individuals. And Canada takes that very seriously, and we made an announcement this week, and we will continue with this work. So thank you for this question.
I'm going to take this opportunity to ask a question of my own. I have to know this from you because it's something that has kind of found a mention in a lot of what you've said earlier today, and also in some of the questions asked by our young change makers. Most agree that sustainable development is the absolute need of the hour. What do you believe young change makers seated here can do, A, to incentivize industries to make choices that are pro-environment, and B, to expedite policy reform that corrects industry practice, especially with regard single-use plastics and all non-biodegradable materials, and its use in the fast-moving consumer goods sector. I'm also asking you this question because I have been overwhelmed by the plastic menace that we are experiencing in the world. It's devastating our oceans, our air, our waters, our soil, and health. And I would really like to know what you believe these young change makers can do to improve policy.
Wonderful, thank you for the question. Two aspects to my answer. First of all, we have to understand that there are still people out there, either in politics or in academia or elsewhere, trying to push the idea that there is a choice to be made between what's good for the economy and what's good for the environment. The idea that you have to pick one or the other, that you can create jobs and create economic growth and create opportunities for everyone, but only if you don't care too much about the environment. Or you can protect the environment, but you can't worry too much about jobs and economic growth. Well, as all of you know, as every single person who actually thinks about it knows, you cannot build a strong economy unless you are also protecting the environment that underpins it. And you cannot protect the environment unless you are creating technological means and opportunities to feed one's family and grow their opportunities while protecting the environment. Those two things need to go together, and on the front lines of that are consumers. The choices you make as individuals as to what you're going to choose to buy, as to how you're going to choose to spend your money or spend your time or get from home to work or to school, how you're going to support political parties or leaders or businesses or communities that are doing the right kinds of things about the world that surrounds us versus people who think that there are still simplistic choices that we can make that will get us through. Unless we start caring about a sustainable economic development that protects the environment, and it's on each and every one of us, we won't get there. And secondly, on the issue of plastics, Canada is hosting the G7 gathering of countries this year. There are 7 major industrialized countries, Canada, the US, the UK, France, Germany, Japan, and Italy, who get together every year to talk about how the issues that are facing the world can be affected and impacted. And we always talk about the economy, we always talk about jobs and technology. But this year I'm bringing in 2 extra themes that we're talking about. One of them is gender. How we make sure that the world is more balanced in terms of supporting women and girls in their success, and in a way that touches everything. But the other one is specifically around oceans and plastics. How we make sure that we are reducing the amount of waste and plastics going into our oceans and having a tremendously negative effect on our lives.
Thank you so much for that. We really needed to hear from you on that as well. I'm going to give it over to you, Samyak. You've been very patient, but thank you for allowing me to have the first go.
So, Prime Minister, you'll be happy to know that there's a live telecast of this talk in rural India. So, our social enterprise, which is hosting this X Billion Labs, runs a platform called NetPar, which means on the internet.
Can you use the mic behind you? It's not, or here, take this one.
Thank you.
Here we go.
Sorry.
I'm my own tech guy.
So I'm going to repeat. So as part of our social enterprise, we run something called NetPar, which is to include rural India onto the internet platform. And we give regional and relevant content to people who don't speak English. And through that platform, men and women are watching you as we speak. And we have a question from a village for you. And then we'll have some questions from Facebook Live.
नमस्कार, माझं नाव दुर्गा पाडवी. तुमच्यासारखा तरुण नेता राजकारणामध्ये जागतिक पातळीवर अशा प्रभावी काम करणारा करतो आहे, हेच खरं प्रेरणादायक गोष्ट आहे. प्रथम या परिषदेच्या माध्यमातून तुम्ही ग्रामीण भागातील तरुणांना आपल्या समाजाची जबाबदारी खांद्यावर घेऊन यावर मत राखण्याच्या प्रेरणादायक आहे. अशी मी विनंती करते की तसेच देशातील सर्व महिलांना संदेश देऊ इच्छिते की त्यांना रूढी परंपरा न अडकता समाजाच्या हक्कासाठी उठून उभं राहावं. धन्यवाद.
Thank you. I'll take the first one, and Sophie will take the second path of that. There's a challenge right around the world of young people leaving rural areas to go to cities, which is having a double impact. One is our more rural areas are losing all their young people and are wondering where their continued success is going to come from. But our cities are also accepting more young people than there are jobs for right now. And we have to think about both how we empower those young people to be able to get the education, get the learning they can, and then perhaps return home or build success that is more broadly shared. But we also have to think about how we directly create opportunities in more rural areas for success right there. And I think one of the things that is exciting about the technological changes we're surrounded with is location becomes incidental. I'm sitting right here and I just took a question from a long way away. We have an ability to connect across broad distances and telecommute and work via Skype and FaceTime and all those sorts of things, we need to make sure that the technological infrastructure is available in rural areas and that the education to provide the opportunities to benefit from that is accessible to everyone. And that specifically includes women and girls in rural areas who still, to this day, are facing far too high rates of child marriages and marginalization that we have to address and empower. Sophie.
Earlier this week, we met with some fabulous women who work at weaving and putting pieces of mirrors and cloths, and who were doing wonderful, what I like to call craftswomanship. And they were saying how the opportunity to, you like that word, right? Yay, craftswomanship, woo! And craftsmanship, it goes together. We must be allies. And they were saying how the simple opportunity of economic participation in their lives changed the dynamics of family, changed the dynamics of community. And they have faced resistance, because we all do in rural areas, but you need one ally. And women must stand together. We were talking about it on the side stage. This is a turning point for so many human beings on the planet. And we who are advantaged must reach out to people who are disadvantaged, because it is not from lack of talent. It is from lack of opportunity and education, and it is so important to reach out to the people who are further behind physically or geographically, to make sure that we include them in a system that is now more easy to travel within and to promote talent within.
My next question will be from Facebook Live, where there are also thousands of young people watching us as we speak. So, slightly on a different note, what is Canada's policy with cryptocurrency, and will you invest your money in bitcoins?
That's like a trick question, Samyak.
Is this a family investment decision now?
Sorry, the echoes are preventing me from actually absorbing your question. What was your question again, sorry?
What is Canada's view on cryptocurrency, and will you invest your money in bitcoins? Bitcoins.
Bitcoins. Blockchain technology is extremely exciting. I think how we're investing in many new technologies is going to be create new opportunities around the world. Call me old-fashioned in some senses, but I like to know what underpins an economy, money. I mean, Canada's money or India's money is printed based on the economic activity of the country. I think that creating money based on nothing but computer formulas is in danger of not being actually grounded in anything real. So I'm very excited about blockchain technology, which can be used with existing monies, but Bitcoin, I'm not convinced.
Okay, that's good to know. Do you have a different view?
I take care of the finances in the house, so he doesn't really know, but...
Anyway,
but
we have a budget coming out next week. We're doing very fine on managing finances. I get the nation, she gets the household, and she has the hard work.
Okay, we'll take another question from Facebook Live. So we live in the age of social media, right? And a lot of young people are very active on social media. But the question is, how do you convert a like on a Facebook page to action on ground? A quick example is that we run a movement to get young people to adopt. It's called Adopt India, and we're encouraging 2 million young couples to adopt. So on our Facebook page, we have 2 million likes, but we only have about 200 applications to adopt. So how do you bridge that gap?
Yeah, no, that's a huge and great question. This idea of what's happening on social media or in the virtual world versus what happens IRL, in real life. The challenge that we often face is, you like the right page and you think, oh, okay, I've helped the cause. I've stood up for making a difference by supporting something by a click. it actually takes real-world effort. It actually takes a capacity to act meaningfully and tangibly in the world around you to actually change the world around you. And one of the things that we've reflected on in politics, as we're using more social media, as we use more means of communications, is everything has to have a link to the real world. If you're going to recruit volunteers for a political party online, you have to then be able to get them out and go knock on doors. If you're going to get people who like you on Facebook, they then have to be ensured that they're actually going to get out and vote or volunteer or donate. I mean, there needs to be an understanding that creating easier pathways of connection between a virtual world and a real world is one of the big challenges of our life. And we see it actually in the negative in some spaces where people will say things online to another person that they would never say if they were standing right in front of that person because they'd get punched in the nose. There has to be an understanding of the consequences and the connections between real life and the virtual activities. So saying, social media and online connections are incredibly powerful at connecting and empowering. They just have to then lead to impacts in the community, in your world. No matter what level you're at in a virtual video game, that's not going to change who you are or what impact you have in the world when you get up the next morning and want to actually live a fulfilled day.
Dia?
Before you go away, because I have this opportunity to ask, I am going to ask one more very important question. I recognize that it's another thing that you spoke of in your keynote speech, and I'm pretty sure it would have inspired many of our young change makers here, but I'd like for us to deliberate a little more on that point. Children of conflict are a harsh reality of the world that we live in today. And they will be relevant to the future, and they're relevant to the present, the right now. Just as much as all the other children who have been spared the tragedy of war. Do you believe that governments need to and can do more to encourage the relocation and rehabilitation of these children? And whether perhaps there could even be a policy that binds the planet, every country, every nation across the world to help these children get better opportunities in life, and just to get the right to life?
That's a wonderful question. Both Canada and India are very active in the United Nations peacekeeping forces and missions. And one of the things that Canada has recently done to move forward in contributing to UN peacekeeping is establish an initiative that is directly based and focused on child soldiers. Children in conflict zones are being used as combatants. And obviously, not only does it have a terrible impact on the child in question, but if you can imagine a peacekeeper, walking through a village and suddenly comes upon a group of young people, a group of 7-year-olds manning a checkpoint with guns pointed at them, what do you then do as a peacekeeper? How do you engage with that situation? And this is something that I think all countries can agree must not continue, and taking a leadership role on reducing the impact and keeping children out of conflicts is a big piece of it. But further, there are millions upon millions of displaced people around the world, many of them families, many of them children, and giving an opportunity for a kid to grow up, to get an education, to have stability, and to have hope for the future is something that requires us all to be more vigilant, because those young people who grow up in terrible situations without hope will easily turn to violence and hatred and end up causing much more harm than it would cost to invest in them, invest in a brighter future, welcome them into countries around the world, give them opportunities to go to school, to grow up, to contribute. We cannot continue to have a world that so neglectfully marginalizes and leaves completely bereft of hope so many millions upon millions of people, which is why Canada has stepped up over the past years in accepting more immigrants and more refugees, because we know that it's good for Canada, it's good for the world, and I know many more countries are looking at doing that as well and should.
Thank you so much. Madam, I have a quick question for you. You've done some impressive work in mental health, but one reality of young people is that unemployment, competition, these are all realities, and these create mental pressure on young people. So how do you balance between living and surviving so that mental health is also considered?
That's one deep question. That balance is a hard one.
Yeah.
I feel that as a society and as a democratic and thriving country like Canada, we are responsible for the ones who are struggling. Therefore, for example, when we think of the people who struggle most right now on the planet on an inequality point of view, women and children, we have come forward, Canada has come forward with the International Feminist Assistance Policy. Therefore, in every single decision that this government makes, there is a gender-based lens. So we see how do the less fortunate benefit from this decision. And that is not just for the status of women ministry. It is for every single ministry because it is at the core of not only our vision, but our core values as human beings, and it motivates every single decision and action that we should take.
Thank you so much. Now, we have a very special gift for you to conclude this session. I would like to tell you a short story. I'm really sorry, but why don't you would like to take it? Sure. Please go ahead. Please go ahead. A mic. We can hear you.
Speak loudly.
Why don't you ask us your question?
Do you have a question, miss?
So just for everybody else so that they know the question.
Excellent. So the question is about what is your motivation to be a political leader, and what is the best path to entering politics? And that's a question I get often from young people. First of all, the motivation to become a political leader is no more, no less than wanting to figure out how to make a difference in the world. I chose to become a school teacher because for me, when I left university, that was a very strong and meaningful way for me to be able to make an impact in the world, to have an impact on young people as I was teaching. And I was in my 20s. I wasn't yet fully formed as a person in politics as I would eventually become, but I knew that I would be able to have a meaningful impact. And that's what we should always look at. Maybe your way to have a meaningful impact on the world is to be a dentist or an artist or a librarian or a school teacher or a community worker or just a lawyer or a farmer. There's all these different paths you can take to shaping the world for the better. But if you do decide that politics might be the path for you, don't think so much, and anyway, this is the Canadian experience, and I don't want to speak too much about the Indian experience, because I know your political system is somewhat different. But one of the most important things I find in politics is demonstrating an ability to gather people together and serve and represent them. Have you started an organization that is having an impact on cleaning up a local park or getting better outcomes for a group of students? Have you been able to mobilize and empower people to actually change the way your community and society works? And it's not necessarily politics directly. It could be through just about any profession that then leads you into politics. But mostly being able to demonstrate your ability to serve your community, to draw people together so they can serve and improve the community around them, is at the center of politics. It shouldn't be about accumulating power to lead from the top. It should be about mobilizing everyone to be able to lead in their daily lives. The same way, for me, a good teacher isn't someone who sits at the front of the class and hands out the answers to the students. A good teacher is someone who understands the needs of the students and empowers them to find their path to develop the answers for themselves. A good politician should be about empowering citizens to create success for themselves, for their society. And that's always been, I think, the effective approach in politics.
Thank you, everyone.
Good luck.
My apologies if we could not ask more questions, but we are pressed for time. We have a very special gift for both of you, coming from a village deep inside Gujarat, which is the home state of our Prime Minister. We have artisans from Hansiba, which is the movement that has 2 million women that have collectively started a social enterprise, and they stitch and weave, and then they sell their products across the world, and they've made something very special just for you.
These
Please
are the
welcome the artisans from
that you mentioned.
Self-Empowered Women's Association and with their brand Hansiba. And we had seen the film about them earlier today. As always, time for a selfie. Yes. And we must take a selfie together with all of you guys. So please, Ben, lay down and lay down and no, they're not all right. I'm so sorry, Ben.